Hello everybody, thank you for joining me for this second in the series of Me and My Place and a Bit of Kabbalah, where we'll be looking at the Jewish home from a mystical point of view with the help of Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. To understand how he approaches this, it's first of all necessary to have knowledge of the Jewish way of seeing the world. We see that the physical world that we inhabit is actually the lowest of four worlds that connect us to God. We have God himself. Then there is the world of Atzilus, which is the world, as it were, next to him. The world of Bria, where things are created out of nothing. The world of Yetzirah, where things are formed. And the world of Asiya, the world of doing, which is our world. And everything in the physical world, our world, is a manifestation of a higher spiritual reality. The way I like to think of this is rather like the colours on taps. When you have a hot and cold tap, sometimes the hot tap will be marked with red and the cold tap will be marked with blue. This doesn't mean, of course, that hot water is red and cold water is blue, but the colours are symbols that remind us about the nature of the water. Likewise, according to Judaism, everything in the physical world is the symbol of a corresponding higher spiritual reality. And we can actually look at the home in this way. The most fundamental elements of a home in Judaism are its boundaries, its walls. We read that when Jacob built a home for himself after he ran away from his brother Esau, who sought to kill him, Jacob put around his head a line of stones. And this was his first Jewish house. And it's significant that there was no roof to this house, it was simply boundaries. And Rabbi Nachman of Breslov explains that the boundaries are what characterize a Jewish home. He explains further that the reason why a Jewish home has boundaries is because otherwise the spiritual splendor from that home would be too great. Imagine the world that is suffused with light that is so unbearably bright that it dazzles us utterly and we can barely open our eyes to see it. We would be blinded in such a world. Therefore, there are boundaries that God mercifully puts in place to contain and shape the spirituality, the holiness that radiates from him to us. And that way we can actually exist, function, and make choices in our world. Likewise, the walls of a Jewish home are a physical expression of the spiritual bounds and form of that home. If it were not for those spiritual bounds, the home would simply be too dazzlingly, radiantly magnificent for anybody to behold it. This tells us, first off, that a home is an intensely spiritual place. It's something that we should treat with respect, somewhere where we should conduct ourselves in a reverent and holy way. There is actually more to the holiness of the home than its simple holiness as we've understood. Indeed, the Jewish home is connected to the temple in Jerusalem. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov says further that every Jewish home, and indeed every Jewish business, should have a mezuzah on its door. We know about this, of course, from the first paragraph of Shema, where it says, Uchtavtam am zot betecha v'isharecha. There shall be words of Torah written on the doorposts and the gates of our homes. And Rabbi Nachman of Breslov says that the mezuzah is like a Sefer Torah in miniature. It's written in the same way and on the same material. And the two first paragraphs of Shema that are written in the mezuzah say in miniature the three fundamental ideas of Jewish existence. The existence of God in the first line, our obligation to love God in the first paragraph, and our obligation to respect God and obey his commandments in the second paragraph of Shema. Just as the Ark in Jerusalem held a Torah scroll, so too our Jewish homes are repositories on every single doorway, except for a bathroom and toilet, of a Torah scroll, which tells us that our homes are like temples in miniature. The holiness of the temple, where priests could only enter with proper purity and with a specific holy intent, that tells us that in our homes as well, we should behave ourselves like priests to the world, ministering to the spirituality of humanity at large, and not entering our homes for frivolous or undignified or unbecoming purposes. Rather, we should enter and conduct ourselves in our homes in a holy way, and ideally, all that we do in our homes should be done in a way of serving God. Even our relaxation and our chat should be in ways that encourage other people to feel good about themselves, to feel supported, to feel strong, and we should be recharging ourselves emotionally and physically so that we can serve God the better. In fact, Rab Nachman of Breslov discerns a connection between the Jewish home and the Even Shetia, the foundation stone upon which the ark rested in the temple, and from which, as we saw in the last talk in this series, that the whole of the universe emanated. It says in Divine chapter 22 verse 8, Ki tivneh bayit chadash va'asita ma'akeh lagagecha. When you build a new home, you should make a parapet for your roof. The last letters of the Hebrew words, Ki tivneh bayit chadash, when you build a new home, are a yud, a hey, a taf, and a shin. And if we rearrange those letters, we get the word shetia, which is the name of the stone in the center of the temple upon which the ark resided. This is a further clue, along with the mezuzah, to the fact that every Jewish home is a temple in miniature and is connected to the spirituality of the temple. There are further messages that can be derived about the Jewish home from Jewish law. One is the laws of Shabbat. Now we know that on Shabbat we're not allowed to take something from a private domain to a public domain, or vice versa. The names for the public domain and private domain are Reshut Harabim, the domain of the many, and Reshut Hayachid, the domain of the one. Now it's an interesting peculiarity of Jewish law that the Reshut Harabim, the public domain in the laws of Shabbat, only extends from the ground up to a height of 10 tefachim, 10 handbreadths. You can try it out for yourself if you'd like. You'll see it's about waist high. And this means that technically in Jewish law, if you were to take something from a Reshut HaYachid, from a private domain, and not actually put it down, but just hold it above 10 tefachim high, you wouldn't actually have transgressed the laws of Shabbat. Imagine for a moment that this is the windowsill of my home, and I take something out from there, and I don't put it down, but I hold it up in the air above a height of 10 tefachim, 10 handbreadths. Technically, I haven't violated the Torah law of transferring something from a private domain to a public domain. However, this does not work the other way around. Whereas the Reshut Harabim, the public domain, only extends from the ground up to a height of 10 tefachim. The private domain, the Reshut HaYachid, has no upward limit. It extends, in the words of the Talmud, ad harakia, up to the very heavens. And Rav Nachman of Breslov says that there is a deeper significance to these two ideas. The Reshut Harabim, the domain of the many, is the space beyond the Jewish home. It is an unhallowed place, a place where there is a proliferation of ideas, a plurality of modes of conduct, where different things happen, where there is a cacophony, a dissonance, a disunity, where there is not a oneness as there ought to be. This place, this Reshut Harabim, is distant from God, but it only extends up to waist high. It is a place that is distant from the magnificence and the beauty of the Jewish mind, of the human mind in its purest form, because the mind is distant from the waist, and it is significant that the Reshut Harabim only goes so high. The Reshut HaYachid, the domain of the one, is a reference to God himself, because God himself can reside in our homes, and he connects us to the heavens, because every home can be connected to the heavens. Every home, as we've seen already, is the domain of the one himself, of God. However humble our homes may be, if we make our homes a fitting place for the Yachid, for the one, for God, then he will indeed reside among us and within us, and our homes will be connected to the very heavens. It is significant that Jacob, when he created his very humble home, that line of stones around his head, he worked out, after he had his dream of the ladder with angels ascending and descending to the heavens, he worked out, Ein zeh ki im Beit Elokim, this is nothing but the house of God, v'zeh sha'ar hashamayim, and this is the gate of the heavens. And so it can be said about every Jewish home that is used in a proper way, and every human home that is used in a proper way. Ein zeh ki beit Elokim, this is nothing but the house of God. V'zeh sha'ar hashamayim, and this is the gate of the heavens. There is a cautionary note that Rav Nachman Reb Breslov adds to the holiness of the Jewish home. And it goes like this, based on the verse that we mentioned before, Ki tibneh bayit chadash, when you build a new home, va'asita ma'akeh lagagecha, you will build a parapet for your roof. Why is it that the Torah troubles to tell us this health and safety detail, that when we have a home with a roof, there has to be a fence around the roof? Remember what we found out at the beginning, that everything in the physical world is a manifestation of a higher spiritual reality. Well, the roof in the Jewish home is a symbol of the summit of spiritual achievement. And we have to build a parapet around it because spiritual achievement in Judaism is dangerous. When we are lonely, when we are isolated from God, when we are low, we don't have much of a temptation to do harm. The forces ranged against us are not very great because it is so easy for us to sin anyway, because we are isolated and weak. The more we grow spiritually, the more we stretch towards the heavens and ascend thither even in this life, the higher and the stronger are the forces ranged against us, the more we need to guard against sin. We do not say, I've attained so much, I've learned so much, I've become so holy, now I can relax. No, on the contrary, in Judaism, spirituality is an ever ascending scale of achievement and effort. The more we do, the more we can do, the more we must do, the more careful we must be, because the more we have to lose, and the more of the spiritual dangers ranged around us. However, we are not afraid of that. We can make a parapet around our roof. We can guard against failure, even if we have achieved much already, and through that we will ascend ever higher in our connection with God, and we will indeed treat our homes as gates to the heavens. There is another Jewish house that we haven't yet dealt with, and that is the shul, the Beit Elokim, that Jacob discerned through his home. Ultimately, it is the Beit Elokim, the shul and the temple, that are the powerhouses and the sources of our spirituality, and those we will find out about, please God, in the third of this series. Thanks for listening.